Over 60 million U.S. adults experienced mental illness in the last year. This study comes from a 2024 study. About 23% of adults, 23% of adults, that's nearly 1 in 4. Nearly 1 in 4 adults in the United States in the last year has been a part of some type of mental illness. Now, to put that in perspective for you, just take a second. Everybody look to your left and your right. If you're still looking at me, you are not following directions. Everybody look at your left and your right and pick out 3 other people, okay? Now, if they look like they've had a mental illness, then you found one. But if they don't, it's you. You know what I'm saying? It's you. The thing is, we don't like the term mental illness, though. It kind of eats at us. It's got some stigma to it, and so we wouldn't say, "Hey, I've got a mental illness." That's not something that's okay with us. We don't love that language. We soften it a bit when we have conversations. We would say something like, "Hey, we've got some mental health struggles." Like, "Hey, my mental health has really just been difficult lately," or "It's been hard." Or I've been really struggling with my mental health lately. Those are the phrases that we feel a little more comfortable using. Clinically, on that side of things, they probably wouldn't, or not probably, they wouldn't differentiate. Like if you got depression, you got depression. If you got anxiety, you got anxiety. It is what it is. And the term mental illness is a health condition that affects a person's thinking, emotions, behavior, or ability to relate to others and carry out daily life. And there's a lot of that taking place in our culture. When mental health goes unchecked, when no one does anything about it, it just grows. Mental health is not one of those things where if there is some struggle to it, that it just kind of like disappears. It continues to grow. And when it grows, it goes beyond just, "Hey, I had a bad weekend," or "This has been a difficult season of life," to, "Hey, life is hard as a whole." It jumps into things like this. 5.5% of adults reported serious thoughts of suicide in the last year. In total, in 2024, just over 49,000 families lost someone to suicide. Here's the more scary piece. Over 1 million people a week are now telling some form of AI that they are thinking about suicide. Over 1 million people a week are having conversations with ChatGPT or some version of it, saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about suicide." At church, we need to say the quiet parts out loud over the next few weeks. The truth is, though, God can handle our honesty. There's a strong overlap with mental health struggles and substance use disorder. Of the 60 million adults with mental illness in the United States, 21.2 million also had a substance use disorder, which makes sense because when we don't get any kind of help, there's no relief, and the internal struggle begins to build. We look for an outlet. We look for something to change the way we feel. And so maybe it's the way we were brought up, like, "Oh, when my dad got home after a long, hard day's work, this is how he did it." And so we begin to dabble in those things. And before you know it, though, it's not just a hard day's work that's created the inner turmoil. It's like something more than just the work day was difficult. Like there's some ongoing mental health struggles that we can't quite put our finger on, can't identify, can't quite really kind of figure out what it is or who it is or where it's from. We just feel it. And so we reach for something. We search for something to numb that pain or to make that pain disappear for a moment. And when that begins to happen, we realize, oh, that actually, for a couple hours, I forgot about it. For an evening, I forgot about it. For an evening, I kind of felt like myself again. It wasn't myself, the version I remember, but it was the unsad part of myself. And so then we begin to medicate ourselves more often. And the more often that we do it, before you know it, what was just a temporary, let me forget my problems, has become a permanent addiction. So it makes sense. It tracks. I get the logical progression. Adults are more anxious than ever. According to the American Psychiatric Association's 2024 annual poll, 70% of adults in the United States are anxious about current events. So what do we do with all of this information? Let me speak just at the moment to you who might be considered or consider yourselves a follower of Jesus. What do you do with that information? As a person of faith, what's your responsibility? Is there a right way for people of faith, for people who follow Jesus, to engage in mental health topics, discussions, help? Is there a biblical way, or is there a frowned upon way? Does the phrase, real Christians shouldn't feel this way, does that ring true? It's something that's said. This idea that if you actually knew faith, you wouldn't feel the way you feel. If you actually understood grace, you would never actually think that life is bad, because you would constantly be in a state of life is so good because I have grace. My world's falling apart, but I still got grace, and so I'm fine with it, right? That's the way Christians are supposed to react when difficult things happen in their life. This unspoken belief keeps people from sharing their actual struggles, though. Faith has wrongly been equated with mental and emotional clarity. We have this phrase that's started to be repeated in our culture. It's okay to not be okay. The hope is that it would break down barriers and stigma associated with mental health struggles, where someone could say, I'm not okay, can somebody help me in my not okayness? But then for some reason in the church, we reverse that. And we say it's not okay to not be okay because of Jesus. You know, there are exceptions to this. And I think it's important we acknowledge the exceptions. There are some people in your family's life that you will probably see here in a couple weeks while you eat turkey, and their entire life's mission is to create drama. They love it. They love for things to not be okay. Like when they wake up in the morning, they're like, hey, I can't wait to stir something up. You know what I'm saying? And a family gathering wouldn't be a family gathering unless they brought to everyone's attention how the world's falling apart and how they have a solution to fix it, and just buy my $9.99 like whatever the pitch is. You know what I'm saying? Like there are exceptions to this. There's also exceptions that there are some of you, hope maybe in this room, or for sure you probably know some, that their whole life they've grown up, they're now an adult, and their mother has followed them around everywhere, wiping their nose and wiping the dookie off their rear end, and they are grown adults, and they have no idea how to life. And for those individuals, it's not a mental health issue. It's a you need to be kicked in the pants issue. And so does your mama, to be honest with you. So there's exceptions to this, but we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater just because there are people who just love to start drama, and because there are people who honestly just need to figure out how to grow up. Like those two exceptions exist, but we can't then ignore the actual problems just because we have a few people that come to mind that's like, hey, it's not real. Their issues are self-created. I get it. I don't want to talk about the exceptions. I want to talk about the majority, which are not exceptions. People who are actually struggling to figure it out. Last year, the Noonan Times wrote an article on the series. We've been doing this series for 7 years. Not the same way every year. Each year's got a different theme, and we kind of tackle a different piece of mental health. But for some reason, they picked up on it, and they wrote an article about it, and it went out. It was a great article. They did a great job with it. The comments, though, online were not all that great. that there was a lot of people that were very upset that we were using Sunday morning stage time to talk about mental health. They were furious about it. And same crew was also furious that one of the counselors we brought in was a female and that we allowed her to speak on stage on a Sunday morning. Yeah, whoa, that really got you. Okay, yeah. So I had to stay off Facebook for a minute because their mental health issue was going to become a physical health issue. I had to make sure I drew a line. I'm saying like, oh, we're going to draw a line. Okay, can't cross that line. Now, people will say, hey, mental health is just a made-up issue. The counselors have make-believe jobs. And I can see how that could be a discussion to have. Psychology as a worldview is dangerous. I'll admit that. Psychology as a worldview is dangerous because these three questions have to be answered if it's your worldview, right? Like these three questions are pretty important. What does it mean to be human? If psychology is giving you that answer, that's dangerous. The second question is, what's wrong with humanity? Like, it's obvious it's not perfect, so what's wrong with it? And if psychology comes up with its own answer to what's wrong with humanity, that's also dangerous. Question 3 is, what's the solution to humanity's problem? If psychology comes up with that answer as well, well, then that is dangerous. The worldview does matter, but I don't want to use psychology as a worldview because I actually know the guy who created humanity. So when we ask the question, what does it mean to be human? He's given us an answer. And when we ask the question, what's wrong with humanity? He's also given us an answer. And when we ask the question, what's the solution for humanity's issue? He's also given us an answer. And so I don't need psychology to be my worldview. The Creator has already given me that. However, I do want to make sure I leverage psychology as a tool to be used. It's important that we recognize there are folks that wake up every day and God has gifted them and equipped them to leverage that tool of psychology to help people discover coping skills, to have hard conversations, to figure out how to express their feelings to someone else. Because the truth is, for the last 15 years, the thing they've been most intimate with is a little piece of aluminum that sits in their pocket connected to the internet. And that there are individuals who are gifted by God, called by God, to leverage a Christian worldview with the tools of psychology to help people take next steps in a healthy way. And our church is connected to so many of those individuals in this community. We need to normalize mental health struggle, not as a badge of honor, but as a badge of reality. And then we also need to normalize reaching out for help. And we need to do that as a church, not because it feels like the right thing to do, but because it's actually what the Bible does. Today, I'm going to walk you through two very emotionally charged moments. And I'm just going to read you their words. Before we get there, I'm going to give you a little background. There was a guy by the name of Korah, Korah, Korah. And there's full story that I'm not going to tell you now, sits in a book called Numbers. If you are new to Bible study and you were to open the Bible from the very beginning, you have the first book is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. And so it's right at the beginning, it's right at the front. And Numbers chapter 16 has the story that I'm going to briefly tell you. I'm not going to give you all the details. I will just say this. The story is wild. It's one chapter. You got to go read it. Don't read it now because you're like, I got to read the wildness now. No, just chill, but write it down. You need to go read this story later. I'm going to summarize it for you, but I'm not going to give you the details of how it happens, but it is nuts. Number 16, you need to go read it later. Korah is a part of this. Korah is leading a rebellion in chapter 16 against the leader that God has for the people of God. His name was Moses. And Korah takes like 250 folks, and they're going to lead a rebellion against Moses and his brother Aaron. And so him and Moses are like facing off. And so Moses, as confident as he can be, he's like, let's just see. Anyway, I'm not going to give you the details. But he and Moses face off. It doesn't go well for Korah. Korah's dead. He is absolutely dead. And it's fascinating how it happens. However, I say all that to say, fast forward generations later. So that has taken place. Generations into the future, there's another book that we find in the Bible. When we open it, it's kind of towards the middle, called Psalms. In Psalms, there is a psalm. That sounds weird. In the book of Psalms, there is a psalm, actually two psalms, a few psalms. We're going to be in two psalms today. That says it was written by a son of Korah. So this is generations later. Great, however many greats, granddaddy, he's dead. But his family goes on to still be a part of what God's doing, right? At least a couple of them do. That aren't, well, you'll have to read it. There's a bunch of them dead, by the way. So he's a worship leader, this son of Korah, or great-grandson. He's a son of Korah is the way the Bible describes it. He's a worship leader in the temple. And as a worship leader in the temple, he records a psalm. A psalm is a song or a poem. It's just emotional writing that's recorded. There's a bunch of them in the book of Psalms. And so he writes this down, and it's recorded forever for everyone to see. This son of Korah is separated for some reason. The Bible doesn't tell us why. He's a worship leader at the temple. For some reason, he's been exiled. He's no longer in Jerusalem. It doesn't seem like it's something he's done wrong. It seems like it might be a conflict with another nation, and they've taken people who were leading worship and anyone who did anything with the temple away. We really don't know. All we know is he's separated. He's about 100 miles north, and he cannot come back to Jerusalem. He can't get back to the temple. He's with whoever he says enemy a lot in his talk. We don't know who the enemy is, but he is surrounded by them. He cannot leave wherever he's at. And he writes Psalm 42 and 43. Let's take a look at how he expresses some of the difficult moments in his own life. Now, if you're like relatively familiar with Bible study, this first two verses I'm going to read you are probably like, hey, I've heard this before. However, the image you're going to get when I read it is probably different than the image you will end with when I'm done reading it. We'll see how it goes. Psalm 42, 1 and 2, the son of Korah writes this in exile from the temple. As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When can I go and meet with God? Now, when we first read this, there's a song that goes with this psalm. I don't know if you've heard it. It goes like, as the deer pants for, everybody know it? You're gonna sing with me? I'm just kidding, you don't sing with me. Right? But it gets in this whole thing, it's like, in my soul longeth after you, the whole thing. In the visual, when people paint pictures of this, they paint like a Bambi scene, where Bambi's coming down to this beautiful stream, and it's like, oh, this little deer is gonna get a little drink of water. That is not what he says. He says, as a deer pants for streams of water, my soul pants for you, God. My soul thirsts for God. When we look at the original language, it's so much deeper than just Bambi needs a drink. He's not saying, I would love to just get a little more God. He's saying, if I don't get God soon, I'm not gonna make it. In other words, my soul is dehydrated. I'm still showing up, but I am running on fumes. Verse 3. My tears have been my food day and night, while people say to me all day long, where is your God? And so we get the context clues the further we read down about just how desperate this, as a deer pants for the water, so my soul longs after you, right? He says, look, I've been able to eat nothing for days. The only thing my mouth has tasted are the tears running down my face, getting into my mouth. That's the only thing I've eaten. I can't eat. That's how upset I am. That's how much internal turmoil I'm in. That's how much my emotional state has driven me. I can't eat anything. The only thing I've tasted for days are the tears running down my face. And to make it worse, the people that are holding me in captivity keep asking, Where is this God you're supposed to serve? He's abandoned you. He hasn't shown up. He's saying, I can't eat. I can't sleep. People think my faith is fake, and I can't feel God anywhere. Verse 4. These things I remember as I pour out my soul. How I used to go to the house of God under the protection of the Mighty One with shouts of joy and praise among the festive throng. He's remembering when life was good. He's like, I remember what it was like when I felt like myself. I remember how I used to be full of joy. I remember what it was like when I was around the temple and there would be like these festivals and there would be just throngs of people. And I remember being in those moments and I remember leading the people in the world. I remember when I had purpose. I remember when my life meant something. I remember when I felt like living. I remember those moments. But that's not where I'm at. I remember when I felt like God actually showed up for me. In other words, he's saying, I miss the version of me that felt alive. I miss the joy that I used to have in God. Verse 5. Why, my soul, are you downcast? Why so disturbed within me? Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise him, my Savior and my God. So in verse 5, he has switched to talking to himself. He's asking himself, like, why are you so downcast? Downcast literally means to be bowed down, like face on the floor. The idea of being disturbed. When he says, why so disturbed within me? That word means a roaring or a groaning that's like churning inside of him. And he's asking himself, he's like, why are you like this? He's both the patient and the counselor. He's trying to convince his own soul not to give up. He's asking the question, why am I like who I am? Why do I feel like this? A question I would think every struggling individual has asked themselves at some time or another. Verse 7, deep calls to deep in the roar of your waterfalls. All your waves and breakers have swept over me. This is another image that when we read it, it's like, oh, like a waterfall. That's cool. And we see a waterfall, and maybe we stand like half a mile away and we can see the waterfall, and it's just gorgeous. Like, man, look what God did. Like, this is great. But if you've ever been blessed enough to get actually at the foot of a legit waterfall, it's not serene. It's chaos. It's just this loud, thunderous pouring out of thousands and thousands and probably hundreds of thousands of gallons of water just bashing into itself over and over again, just churning up underneath with no relief. The water just keeps coming. It continues to hit the same place over and over again. And he's standing at the bottom and he's like, this is what it feels like. There's no relief. And so I am as deep in this as I can. And he says, my depth, deep, calls out to deep. He says, look, I understand, God, you have depth I can't imagine, but I am as deep as I can possibly get. I'm at rock bottom. This is the depth of what I can do. And I'm calling out to you. He's saying, I feel like I'm drowning in my own thoughts. But somehow I know God's got to hear me. Verse 9. I say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? Why must I go about mourning oppressed by the enemy. It's a brutal picture of spiritual doubt and abandonment, isn't it? The idea of why have you forgotten me is probably one of the most raw prayers we have in the entirety of the Bible. He's saying, God, where are you? I'm hurting and it feels like you've gone silent. 43 verse 2. You are God, my stronghold. Why have you rejected me? Why must I go about mourning, oppressed by the enemy? Here he shows this cycle of doubt and belief. In one line, he calls God his stronghold. He's like, yeah, you, God, my stronghold. It's a declaration of faith. But then in the very next line, he says, why have you rejected me? This tension of faith and fear coexisting. It's the heart of any emotional struggle as a follower of Jesus. Like, I'm afraid, but I want to have faith. But I feel like there's no answer, but I want to have faith. I feel like there's no one for me, but I know I want to have faith. I feel like I don't have a solution, but I know I want to have faith. And that tension sits on display, not just for someone who calls themselves a God-fearer, but a God-follower. That tension sits on display, not just in his personal diary, but in a letter. Now a book of letters and poems on display for the entire world to see. Not just his world, but generations to come in their worlds. That for 2,000 years, people have been reading this tension between faith and fear that seemingly coexist. He says, I know you're supposed to be my refuge, but right now it feels like you've turned your back on me. It wasn't just the son of Korah that writes like this, though. I mean, I would imagine until today, there's probably a number of you in here that had never even heard the name son of Korah. You're still thinking about, I just got to go read number 16. You know what I'm saying? I want to figure out what happened. But it wasn't just like obscure folks. There's a psalm by David. Yeah, like David and Goliath David, King David, like the most famous guy in the history of the Jewish people in terms of renown and world conquering, like the war hero David. Yes, that David, he writes this in Psalm 13, verse 1. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? David, who's supposed to be a man after God's own heart, has this perceived divine abandonment. That word forever, it shows he's already been waiting a long time. Like it wasn't like, oh, well, shoot, last night was tough. And he wakes up the next morning and it's like, God, forever? He's not saying that. No, whatever's been happening has been happening for a long time. Now, this idea of saying forever, in psychology, it's a cognitive distortion. It's a thought pattern that exaggerates worst case scenarios and it minimizes hope. Happens all the time with us. It's spiritual depression, the sense that God's hidden his face from us. It captures the loneliness that so many people feel when it feels like God's gone silent. David's saying, God, it feels like you've forgotten me. I can't sense you, and I don't know how much longer I can do this. Verse 3, Look on me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. David's desperate. He says, look on me, which just means see me again. It feels like you don't even see me, God. Like I'm praying to you, I'm praying out loud, I'm writing down my prayer in this psalm, but it feels like I'm just now background noise to you. Like I'm crying out, and I know my faith tells me you can hear me, but I don't want you to just have me turned on in the background of your life. Will you look at me? Because maybe you're hearing me, but you're not actually hearing me. If you would look at me, you would see what I'm actually saying. That's big language when he says, or I will sleep in death. Serious talk. It's the language of someone that's near collapse. He's saying, God, if something doesn't change soon, I don't know if I can keep going. And that's David talking. Verse 4. And my enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. There's a fear of humiliation taking place. Mental and spiritual suffering often carries a good bit of shame. A fear of what might happen if others see you fail. He's not just feeling internal pain, he's feeling external exposure. Like I'm supposed to be David. Like I'm supposed to be King David. If I don't get this thing turned around, think about what people will think about me forever. If I fall apart, everyone will see it. Everyone will talk about it. The Psalms are full of lament. It's not just the son of Korah. It's not just Psalm 13 with David. It's full of them. It's full of just raw, heartfelt, emotional pleas and writings that just bear everything that's happening in their soul. Emotional pain, abandonment, hopelessness, all of it is there. Here's where the worldview thing comes in, though. This is where it's important to know the difference between allowing psychology to give you the answer to those three questions. What does it mean to be human? What's humanity's greatest problem? And what's the solution to humanity's problem? The worldview that answers those three questions dictates what happens next. Because the truth is, whether you're a follower of Jesus or not a follower of Jesus, life is going to happen and life is going to be hard. And whether you're a follower of Jesus or not a follower of Jesus, those internal thoughts and feelings have the potential to spiral. Whether you're a follower of Jesus or not a follower of Jesus, we can get in our thoughts long term and suddenly we realize we haven't seen light in a while. Whether we're a follower of Jesus or not a follower of Jesus, anxiety is a real thing. Depression is a real thing. And that has nothing to do with whether we are people of faith or not. The worldview, the faith worldview, just dictates what's my next step. And these two, the son of Korah and King David, they give us a little bit of a window into how that worldview shaped their next step. Let me read the two key moments for you. I already read them to you. Maybe you picked them up or maybe you glanced by them. It was in Psalm 43:5 and Psalm 13:5. I'll read the first one to you. Why, my soul, are you downcast? Why so disturbed within me? Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise him, my Savior and my God. The key word when we read that particular passage, it ought to go off in us, yet. There's some power in that word, yet. Yet tells us so much. It's not just yet, though. Read in Psalm 13:5. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. That word but, before that was this huge list of failings and unseenness, and he's not answering. Now here's the deal. None of that changes for the author of Psalm 42 and 43 or the author of Psalm 13. The circumstances were the same. The yet and the but happened in the circumstances yet to change. The yet and the but took place in feelings that had yet to move. The yet and the but took place in the middle of their despair. The yet and the but took place in the middle of their depression, in the middle of their anxiety. The yet and the but happened when no circumstantial change was on the horizon. They didn't even see a path forward. They didn't even think there was a path forward. They thought, I might be dead soon, yet and but. You see, your worldview changes your first step when you realize you've got a problem. And a worldview informed by the Creator will be yet and but. And a worldview informed by someone else is going to be some temporary fix that doesn't have an eternal solution. Here's the thing, though. It's important to recognize that faith in the midst of a mental health crisis, faith is a great first step. But I will tell you this, anyone who says faith is the only step and the only step needed is wrong, because they have a misunderstanding of what actual faith is. They probably think faith is an intellectual assent. It's something that happens here, but it isn't. When we read the Bible, faith is something that happens here. It's something that happens here. It's something that happens here. Faith is something that happens with our life. We don't believe something, we live something. There are plenty of people that believe in Jesus, but they have no chance of communing with him for eternity. In fact, he looks at demons in the New Testament and he asks them, who do you think I am? And they say, you're the Son of the Most High. They believe in Jesus. There ain't no chance. To hell they're going. Your belief doesn't get you anywhere. Your faith does. And faith is much stronger than an intellectual assumption or assent into, okay, Jesus is the Son of God. So it's not the end. It's never the end. Faith is the beginning of something, and faith is always lived. It's not thought. Faith is active. It's not passive. And so faith is a great first step. And that faith, you know what it's going to do? It's going to do something that the church planter Paul would say, bear one another's burdens. He wasn't talking about help the kid with the heavy backpack to their class. That would be nice. That's fine. If they're struggling, take the backpack. But that doesn't get you off the hook. He's not talking about, hey, when your friend is moving, make sure you go help them move the heavy stuff. Like, that would also be nice, but that's not what he was talking about. These burdens Paul's talking about has nothing to do with what you can hold with your hands and lift with a strong back. Has everything to do with what's happening in here. He says, bear one another's burdens. And so faith, while the first step simply leads you to the next step, which for me, if I were telling you, would be, you should talk to someone who God has gifted to help people with what you're walking through. You come and talk to me, I'll talk to anyone. Yeah, but you know what? Eventually I'm going to say, hey, if you want to do a Bible study, I'm your guy. I got 2 degrees, let's do it. But I don't have 2 degrees in helping you figure out how to walk through depression that's hardcore in your life. That's not what God's gifted me to do. He doesn't wake me up in the morning and say, I've given you this gift. That's not my gift. But I know people who that's exactly what God does every morning. He wakes them up with the breath of life and says, now I've given you something inside of you that you have put to use through education and experience, and you are leveraging that to help point people to a worldview that has an eternal solution that also helps them process very temporary issues in their life. Christian counseling is incredible. It's why we partner with so many Christian counselors in our community, and we're not ashamed of it. It doesn't mean that me as a pastor or any of our other pastors on staff are ill-equipped to help people through life's problems. It doesn't mean that at all. And it means that we're smart enough to know that we don't know everything. And we're also not prideful enough to say we can fix anything. Faith is a really great first step. And the truth is, that worldview does play an impact. It plays a part. If you're new to faith or new to Jesus, and you're like, yeah, I just don't know if I'm comfortable with Jesus being a part of my solution. I mean, I can't lie to you. I get that it makes it a little uncomfortable, but I can't lie to you because Jesus is real. I mean, he's a real person. He lived in a Roman-occupied Jerusalem in the first third of the first century. People outside of the Bible talk about this guy named Jesus who came from Podunk, Nazareth. They talk about a guy who led a revolt, a religious revolt against sometimes Jews, sometimes Romans that were crucified on a Roman cross outside of the Bible. And no one's ever found a body. And for some reason, 11 other guys lost their lives and their families because they would not recant, separated over 40 years, the fact that they saw resurrected Jesus Christ. I'm telling you, he's real. I can't lie to you about it. God with us, that idea of Emmanuel, which means God with us, that Christmas promise, it's a promise kept. God loves you is a reality, whether you want to acknowledge he exists or not. He knows you. He loves you, whether you want to admit that or not. That's okay. It's still the reality. It doesn't change what he is and who he knows and what he knows about you, which is that you're worth something. And to him, he even put a price tag on it. His own son. It's also reality that God hears you. Even if all of your cries have been silent and on the inside, he still hears you. But what we can learn by looking at these guys that went ahead of us in mental health struggles and were bold enough to write them down for the whole world to see is this. Feelings might not change. I can't promise you that your feelings are going to change. I can't. Because some of you are walking through a heartache that will never heal. And people say time makes it better. But the reality is the heart, it doesn't fully heal. And time makes it bearable. Time teaches you how to manage in new ways. But time doesn't heal a broken heart. Some of you experience loss. And that's what's created the broken heart. You'll never get them back. They're gone. So your feeling might not change. I can also tell you your circumstance might not change. There are some of us that are living in a circumstance forced on us. We didn't choose it. Someone did something to us. It's one of the greatest gifts and curses of humanity that we are so interconnected, other people can have a negative impact on our life. They can pull a trigger. They can slip something in a drink. They can lace something that's supposed to be recreational, turns into a hospital stay. They can get behind an automobile or over the wheel of an automobile intoxicated. And those decisions they make drastically impact our life, which might create circumstances that will never change. Or some of us live in the consequences of our own caused circumstances. Because sometimes we do stupid things. Sometimes we make choices that we don't get a free pass on. That we recognize we won't have our kids every day while they're young anymore. We'll split them with someone else. That we'll recognize that we might struggle financially because we made a really boneheaded decision ethically and we lost a job that was a career, and we'll never get that back again. And so your circumstances might not change. As much as you cry out to God, those two things plus a million more might not be changeable. But here's something that can always change: your focus. What you focus on can always change. And if you enjoy focusing on what used to be, if you enjoy focusing on what could have been, if you're stuck focusing on the things that are no longer within reach for you, I would imagine your future has a lot of spiraling in it. But if you can figure out the but and yet, where regardless of the circumstances and regardless of the feelings, you find a way to but and yet in the middle of those circumstances and in the middle of those feelings, then what you've done is taken that first faith step. And that's not the final step, but it's a really great first step that says, hey, you know what? Anything, even if I've caused my circumstance or if someone has caused it to me, the but and yet tells me God can actually have a future for me in it. That it might not be what I dreamed, but it'll be what God provides. And what he provides, I will then call good. Focus does that. What we realize is the turning point for both David and this son of Korah. It wasn't resolution to their problems. It was relationship. That is where the but and the yet came from. That is where the worldview came from. That is where the ability to refocus came from. It wasn't from resolution to their circumstances or resolution to their feelings. It was a relationship with the Creator or a relationship with other Spirit-filled followers of Jesus that helped make a tipping point in someone's life, in their life, and said, hey, let's have a new focus. In fact, there's many psalms of lament that don't end with the answers. They just end with a shift in posture, a shift in focus. Here's my reality, yet I will praise you. In fact, I would say we should do the opposite of what our culture most often does. That hard times, moments of lament for us should be a path to worship, not a detour from worship. That it shouldn't cause us to grow distant because we feel God is distant, to say, hey, well, I'm going to punish you. I'm going to punish you now by not showing up. But instead we would say, no, I'm not going to punish. No, that doesn't make any sense to me. But and yet informs me my first step is going to be, but I'll praise you anyway. Because my worldview tells me this is what it means to be human. This is humanity's shared biggest struggle. And this is humanity's solution. And that is an informed worldview, Jesus. The Psalms teach us you don't have to hide how you feel to be close to God. So the next few weeks, there's going to be a change for us outside on the green. If you're new with us, you're going to see something different next week during this series that might seem a little out of place to you. We have community partners and counselors that will be on site starting next week for the next 3 weeks as we walk through this series. And the hope is not that you would go to the tents that'll be set up outside and they're not going to have like a chaise lounge or chase lounge. How do you say it? Chaise? You know what I'm talking about, that thing you lay in, it's kind of like a chair. They're not going to have one of those set up with a guy smoking a pipe in a sweater vest saying, tell me how you feel. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're not going to do that. But it is going to be opportunities for you to just look at what a counselor looks like who's a follower of Jesus. And you might see they're a little more approachable than you anticipate. It's also going to give you an opportunity to maybe get some information to take a next step to set up an opportunity to go and talk to someone. And so next week, I'll actually ask everyone in the 9 and in the 11 whether or not you see that as something that you would like to participate in or not. My ask as your pastor would be that every single person would visit at least one tent each week. Not because you need to get the information, but because it's going to make sure that everyone who needs to go to the tent feels comfortable enough to go to the tent. So I'm going to ask that everybody does it. We tell the people that are showing up, we tell them that. So there will be people that come and get cards from you that honestly, they don't need the cards. They just need to come get them so the people who actually need the cards feel comfortable enough to go get the card. And that's okay. So for 3 weeks, we're going to engage. We'll continue in the series. There's a piece each week we're going to walk through. And then the practical piece each week is there's going to be opportunities to connect or at least grab some information afterwards. And then we go a little further than that. For the last 7 years, since we started this series, we do it every fall before the holidays begin on purpose. We make sure that we set aside portions of our budget through offering that people give to pay for the first session of counseling for anyone who needs help financially to do it. And so even if you're like, there's no way I would ever go to a counselor, zero chance, it would be a waste of my money. Fine, then waste our church's money. Let's just see how it goes. I believe in it that much. And there's other people that give, that believe in this part of it. Everyone who's been giving for years, they all know we do this every year. And it's not just for a series. We connect people for their first time in counseling throughout the year. It's not just in the fall, right before the holidays. It's a year-round thing. We put dozens and dozens and dozens of people in counseling every single year. And so that'll be something that we'll bring awareness to next week as well. We believe in partnering with people who are gifted by God to help you take next steps with really difficult internal emotional trauma, because we believe in brighter days. And we believe that God has equipped people in our community and some people sitting right next to you to help you find those brighter days. And maybe you're thinking, well, I've tried counseling one time and it was dumb, so bad, so stupid. The version of you today hasn't tried it. And I would imagine you probably know a little bit more about yourself than you did 6 months ago when you tried it. And I bet you've grown a little bit since you tried it. And I bet you learned a little bit more about the struggle you're facing since you tried it. And so maybe you've grown up enough to actually get some use out of it. So maybe you should give it a try with the new version of you. I'll also say that when you go to counseling, you're not going to actually see Jesus. So they're not perfect. And just like so many of you shopped for a church and you came in and you listened to me and you're like, yeah, that ain't gonna work. Or that's what you're thinking right now, you know? And you're gonna go shop somewhere else next week. You could do the same with a counselor. They're not offended. Some people you'll have a connection with, and there's be others it's just like, I can't talk to them for an hour. That was awful. That's part of it. Don't give everything you got on one meeting. Stick to it. Do the hard work. Figure it out. If you've learned nothing else today, if you take nothing else home today, it's my hope that you take home this. The Bible doesn't offer a faith that avoids struggle. It offers a faith that can survive it.